Zach Paulette liked to call. Zach Paulette was the executive director of ACORN and Project Vote simultaneously. In 2008, he said we had a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and it wasn't to elect a black president, it was to pass socialism, to fundamentally change the way we were doing things, and Barack Obama was just a conduit to do it.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
Lou, let me just set this up a little bit. Lake County is a very Democratic county in a Republican state of Indiana. Barack Obama wants to turn Indiana this election, and if it turns his way, it'll be largely because of the voters in Lake County who turn out, again, heavily Democratic. ACORN, who supports Barack Obama in this presidential campaign, went out and tried to register as many new voters in Lake County as they possibly could. The deadline was October 6th. They came in with 5,000 new applications, and when the registrations office began going through them, they found a pattern. Every single one of them was fraudulent.
A lot of them?
50%. We had close to 5,000 total from ACORN, and so far we have identified about 2,100.
So roughly half of them
are
bad.
Correct.
Registered to a dead person, registered as a person who lives at a fast food shop, or just all of them amazingly in the same hand.
So let's be clear. The real voter fraud is people who try to deny our rights by making bogus arguments about voter fraud.
We know that ACORN was directly responsible for about 20,000 votes. Now, the reason that registrations and votes, those can be checked, and they should be checked for their verification by the bipartisan teams. Let me tell you why that's important. 1976, Ford versus Carter. Carter won Ohio by 11,600 plus votes. If 6,000 votes had turned, we would have had President Ford retaining his presidency instead of Carter. That means those votes will matter in a very close race, and they must be scrutinized. ACORN is running a nationwide voter fraud operation. They faint and wring their hands and say they can't stop it. That's nonsense. They have a scheme that is set up that will pay people, poor people and ex-felons, X number of dollars for every voter registration that they receive. They set up an incentive program to turn in fraudulent voter registration forms. This is a threat to democracy nationwide. I think it requires a nationwide investigation by federal authorities.
People from ACORN always ask me to sign the registration of vote, so I do it just to help them for their job.
Did you tell them that, in fact, you're already registered to vote?
Yes, but I mean, they'll ask me or come up with a sob story of why they need the signature, and I just write it for them. I ain't know like you just had to register once. I wouldn't have did it.
Did you tell them that you'd already registered?
Yes.
And what did they tell you?
And they'd tell me that it's cool to sign again because they need the signature because they get paid off a signature, so they just needed the signature, and they told me I wasn't going to get in trouble.
Did they offer you anything, Mr. Johnson, in regards to signing?
I mean, some of their employees just, they really needed the signature, so they'd be like, I'll give you a cigarette, or I'll give you $1 for the signature,
And did they give you a cigarette or $1?
Yeah.
It typically takes 2 months for election officials to analyze the data from an election in Kansas City. November's vote, however, might not be fully processed until spring.
We're way behind the curve this time.
Election Board Director Ray James blames the liberal advocacy group Association of Community Organizations for Reform, now known as ACORN. 3 former Kansas City workers face federal charges for submitting bogus registration cards. Authorities are looking for a 4th worker.
They basically raped our voter rolls in a very abusive and irresponsible way.
Of the 35,000 cards ACORN hand-delivered during its Get Out the Vote campaign, James characterizes 85% of them as trash. littered with fictitious names and forged signatures, not matching election lists.
How do we know who we should put on the rolls when there's 10 or 12 of the same name?
Bogus names, he says, did make it onto the rolls. How many and whether illegal votes were cast are questions James cannot answer until the election has been analyzed. ACORN leadership characterized all this as a witch hunt.
If you go back and you look up Stephanie Strom's articles from summer of 2008, every single article was more watered down than the next. It almost seemed like they were trying to provide cover for ACORN. So I started not to trust her a little bit. From July of 2008 to October of 2008, none of those stories ever got printed the way they were. So on October 23rd, 2008, after working from July to October, I was at home with my daughter, who was 2 at the time. She got into my makeup. So I immediately picked her up and was dropping her in the tub and scrubbing her, and I heard my phone ring. Usually when Stephanie calls, I automatically pick up. But this time, because I was in the bathroom with my daughter, I let it go to voicemail. When I went back and I played that voicemail, it was Stephanie Strom telling me that her editors had told her to stand down from the story. She was coming to D.C. that day, 2 days from that day, to get information regarding the Obama donor list, collusion between the campaign, ACORN, and Project Vote, and she had independently verified meetings between the campaign and Project Vote outside of myself. So I called her back, and she told me that it was not the policy of the New York Times to print a game changer that close to the election.
Before I even get inaugurated, during the transition, we're going to be calling all of you in to help us shape the agenda. We're going to be having meetings all across the country with community organizations so that you have input into the agenda for the next presidency of the United States of America.
When the Messiah speaks, the youth will hear. And the Messiah is absolutely.
Suspect voter registration cards have become the focus of fraud investigations in Nevada, Connecticut, Missouri, and at least a half dozen other states. ACORN says the vast majority of its workers are conscientious, but some might have turned in duplicate applications or provided fake information to pad their.
In fairness, Bertha, I don't know of another organization structured the way you are, where they're both a political wing, if you will, of the Democratic Party and has close relations with the unions and takes federal dollars and takes charity money and does not disclose in a way in which anybody, your donors, the government, when they provide money, can actually get transparency. If you're going to change this, will you come before Chairman Towns, a man who, by the way, voted not to cut off your funding, and give the kind of disclosure to where the Government Oversight and Reform Committee can know that you are doing work with firewalls, as you say, so the American people know that their dollars don't end up doing political activities prohibited by law?
Here's the question that we really should be asking.
Well, no, answer his question, if you will.
Here's the question that we really should be answering. Do you have an organization such as ours that absolutely pays its taxes, that absolutely provides its services, that has firewalls up? We think it's up to the Congress to determine how they would handle some sort of anti-ACORN program or amendment. There are poor people in this country every day that we're saving their homes, making sure that they have decent wages.
But why not go? I mean, could you answer the congressman?
It's not up to us. My job is to serve our 500,000 members.
Ms. Lewis, could you answer the question directly?
And that's
why not go before the committee? He's talking about. Please let me ask the question.
Okay.
Congressman Towns, who's a Democrat. It is a Democratic-controlled committee, but there obviously are Republicans like the ranking Republican, Congressman Issa, are saying, come before us and explain, because it seems like you're merging charity, nonprofit, profit, political, non-political, and that it all gets jumbled up and you don't know which dollar is going where.
Well, that's Congressman Issa's opinion. Again, anyone that asks us to come, we will do whatever we need to do to make sure that folks understand the work that we actually do and that we've been doing for 40 years, that we've been doing, and we've been doing it well.
Chris is asking a question. You're giving an answer that your own consul, Kingsley, said is not true. You don't have firewalls. That's an internal memo That's your consul saying you have these problems. And if you had those problems then, and for 40 years have had these problems, and the American people have put $53 million into your organization and countless other dollars of other state, local, and charity money, the question is, will you allow, at least looking back, a review of these things so that people can have a confidence that you have those in?
Thousand forms. That's what, about 10? Is that about 10% of what they've submitted?
Yeah, they have, according to election officials here, submitted 78,000 applications.
Yeah.
Now, those numbers I gave you, Lou, were up until September. And so everything processed after that, they won't be able to actually spit out until after the election.
You sign it for me, I need 25 of them, or I need a certain amount of them to do it. So me being a kind-hearted person, I say, yeah.
Barack Obama paid ACORN $800,000 this year. He was also their former lawyer and trainer. ACORN has endorsed Obama for president. ACORN admits to submitting 1.3 million voter registrations across the U.S. this year. So far, over 50% have proven to be fake. In Nevada, they are also accused of registering illegal aliens to vote.
I've got a slight home court advantage. I mean, this is a game that we play. Spare me the phony outrage. It's a game. It's a sport. Spare me the phony outrage.
About 10% of what they've submitted?
Yeah,
You sign it for me, I need 25 of them, or I need a certain amount of them to do it. So me being a kind-hearted person, I say, yeah.
Barack Obama paid ACORN $800,000 this year. He was also their former lawyer and trainer. ACORN has endorsed Obama for president. ACORN admits to submitting 1.3 million voter registrations across the U.S. this year. So far, over 50% have proven to be fake. In Nevada, they are also accused of registering illegal aliens to vote.
So let's be clear. The real voter fraud is people who try to deny our rights by making bogus arguments about voter fraud.
CEO Bertha Lewis, and by one of its toughest critics, Congressman Darrell Issa, and we welcome both of you. Put it up. We are their Willie Horton for 2009. We are the boogeyman for the right wing and its echo chamber. Now, the vast majority of Democrats in the House and the Senate have voted to cut funding for ACORN. Can you still say this is just about race and politics? And Issa, it's not just the videos. In July, the Republican staff, your staff, on the government oversight and, or rather the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reforms, issued an 88-page report in which you charge the following. ACORN has committed investment fraud, deprived the public of its right to honest services, and engaged in a racketeering enterprise affecting interstate commerce. Briefly, explain why you think ACORN is a criminal organization.
Well, one thing they did was they covered up an embezzlement, both internally and externally, and then glossed over the dollars. And
this was an embezzlement by the brother of the founder back in 1999 and 2000 of almost $1 million.
Of almost $1 million. Basically, the founder stayed on the board until this became public 8 years later. Now he's with affiliates doing the same work and able to say, well, he's not with the company. The bottom line is there's no transparency in ACORN. Any charity that you would look at, and we've looked at them in our committee, it's a regular part of what we do, you normally find out who's paid what, where the money goes, what the collection costs are, and so on. Here we have literally hundreds of organizations tied under the ACORN umbrella, and you can't even find out what their incorporation is, whether they pay taxes, who makes what, or more importantly, whether corporations within the affiliates work in different areas, political fundraising, getting candidates elected, voter registration, other community activities, whether or not those monies are fungibly moved illegally.